Well, I think it's, in these days, all music we have is special, becomes in a way in a heightened state almost. And at the same time we are deprived of the thing that is most, perhaps not most special, but equally special, which is all the people that are not with us. So it's a strange thing in a way. How have you been dealing with this?
Not well. But at least we are here, we can make music, we can even play with a wonderful orchestra. Of course, we are sitting further away. That is maybe good for the health, but not good for the music, because in chamber music, the closer we sit together, the better. But let's consider ourselves lucky, because many of our colleagues don't even have this opportunity.
Yes, I know. It's exactly what we couldn't imagine. We met, what was it? Not quite 2 years ago, but 1.5 years ago in Berlin, in a restaurant, when you could go to restaurants. We sat closer. With the days we could sit closer. And of course we could not imagine this, this situation. The piece we're playing is special for me because it's not one of the ones I've done the most, also not of the 2 Brahms concerti. And it's a very special one. It feels like it started already. By the time you start, it's like you arrive in the middle of the action somehow, and in a whirlwind. And yet it's it has a sense of drama, but also at the same time sense of, as you said in the rehearsal, majesty. So it has many contrasting, in a way, elements.
It's a very important piece. I consider it one of the great masterpieces of Brahms, and this is a young Brahms. I don't remember who said it, but it's very good that we have to imagine Brahms without the beard.
Yes, and without the belly.
Without the belly, so it's a young man, but already very mature. Brahms was an incredibly clever composer in the best sense of the word, that he knew all the music before him. So everything he does, it has a model. Like the last movement of this concerto is clearly modeled on the of Beethoven's 3rd concerto. And but the second movement is very, very touching as a Benedictus. It was supposed to be a movement of a requiem for Schumann when he committed suicide and he tried to kill himself. It didn't succeed. And the most revolutionary, as you say, is the first movement, which is difficult to characterize because it's so tempestuous, so turbulent, but then it has this wonderful lyrical second theme, second subject, and it's continuing in Beethoven's footsteps in his 4th and 5th concertos, a symphony with piano obbligato. So it's not a 19th century virtuoso showpiece with a soloist and accompaniment, but you have 2 or more protagonists here.
Yeah, definitely a sense of synthesis, of having to come together. There's 2 things I think about when I think about all great music. In fact, not only Brahms, but what you are hinting at is it contains all emotions. He's not 1 or 2 or 3. It contains everything that we experience, and that's why it's hard to do, because you cannot show necessarily everything, or we don't want to show everything at the same time, yet the music contains it somehow. The second thing I think about is, we know from Brahms how long he labored to get to his works, whether it's the 1st symphony, whether it's this 1st piano concerto, which was, I believe, his first orchestral piece that was
yes,
at least performed. And yet when you hear it, there is no sense of hesitation whatsoever. It feels like it could not have been in any other way.
He has the self-confidence, but he had his own doubts, and that's why he's so sympathetic. And this concerto was premiered in Leipzig in the Gewandhaus, and he was the soloist, and it was a gigantic failure. So after that he fell into a deep depression.
Took a few times, didn't it, until it became successful?
Yes, and it took Brahms a very long time to become an established great composer, universally accepted. And even then he always had his enemies. So that's good to know. People like Hugo Wolf. He could not write a good bar for Hugo Wolf. Brahms has special sonorities for the piano. It does come from the Beethovenian tradition, so that it's very, very polyphonic and full of very full chords, chordal writing. Also, there is a wonderful painting of Brahms with a cigar and with crossing his and that's how we see Brahms. But again, this is the older Brahms when he had quite a belly, and the piano was his instrument. I don't think he played another instrument. He certainly didn't play the violin, the cello, the horn, but he knew how to write for those instruments. And with the violin, he had wonderful friends like Joachim, who would advise him. But how do you see the challenge of conducting the first concerto?
Well, as you say, the first movement, there's a lot of space in the bar. And it's how to fill out the space, both in terms of, as you say, the tempestuousness or the drama, but also in the lyrical way, because it has a sense of always moving pulse. And on the surface, it can seem, we don't want to call it conservative. He was called, of course, in many ways conservative. I don't think at all this applies. But it has on the surface a sense of civility somehow, something, but at the same time underneath, it's boiling. There is such a passion in the music, and yet we have to, the dosage, the way we dose, and I find this with all great music, we cannot weigh things in, never mind kilos or grams, but milligrams or nanograms sometimes. And this I find the challenge. The sense of proportion is quite long, the concerto. So to keep it, first movement for sure, as if it's carved in from one big rock. I think this seems
to hold it together.
To hold it together.
And you know, there is all the emotional input, which is enormous, but it has an intellectual element that he uses, for example, and then so he uses diminutions and augmentations and inversions. So this is a very, very clever composer. It's not just instinct and emotion.
No.
Music making and composition is the combination of emotion, instinct and knowledge and intellect. And I think that the emotional and the instinctive has to dominate.
At least
but the other part should not be neglected.
At least the emotional needs for sure to be the first impression and the last thing you think about when you play. But for sure in between before getting to that point, have a lot of, I don't know what we call it, detective work to do, research work to do, to understand the layers. And it's funny you mentioned that, because the other piece we're doing is Schumann 4. Which is exactly the same. It's written a piece which has very few motifs, same like Beethoven could do, and of course Bach, and create a whole world out of a little motif.
And also in D minor.
And also in D minor, absolutely.
And you are doing the final version.
We're doing well, we had a talk before this little recording. There's of course two different ways to look at it. Clara seemed to suggest that it was not a finished first version. Other people think that it was, and he came up with this different piece, as it were, and the first version has its champions. I know that you prefer the second version, as do I, but
we may, yes. Well, sometimes in music we have to make choices. So there are two versions, so you have to choose one. And you are not going to please everybody.
no, at least one at a time.
One at a time. So then you can do both versions, but not simultaneously.
I mean, it's so difficult to start to rationalize after, because we know he was more mature. So it's an easy jump to say he was more mature. But I have to say, I think all the symphonies, each in their own way, have something extraordinary and actually have their own, I don't say closed world, because of course they're siblings, they come from the same family, but he managed to create four very distinct pieces in a way. This one is fantastic. It's quite rhapsodic if you don't know about formal analysis and not interested in that. It seems like one long breath in a way, doesn't it?
Yes, but still, even in the final version, I would think that the D minor symphony is a youthful piece compared to the Rhenish symphony, the E flat. And it's interesting that the tonalities, look at Schumann's fourth symphonies is B flat, yes. The four Brahms symphonies are so I think these composers, they honor the past.
Well, they all stand on each other's shoulder. I remember when I started to be interested more, not only in playing the violin, but in conducting in music in broader terms. And I remember thinking, my God, this Beethoven fifth, wow, to build a symphony out of these four notes. And then I realized, my God, everyone after used this motif. And then as I learned more and more, I realized everyone before him used this motif as well. Pa, 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 pa. It's nothing new. So it seems that there are some universal, what we call them, molecules out there that great people have built from in each their own way. And it makes for a wonderful, I mean, you have an enormous grasp of the repertoire from beginning to, to the end of at least that form of music. And I suppose the more we do, the more you do, the more it feels, I don't want to say it makes it smaller, it makes it more rich, but it makes it, we see them in connection with each other and the way these composers stood on each other's shoulders.
Yes, and Brahms and Schumann, this is a very unique relationship. I mean, it was Schumann who discovered Brahms, and he heralded him as a new genius. And Brahms, I don't like to get into these speculations with what happened between Clara Schumann and Brahms. Who knows?
We don't know.
And is it important? But what is important is the deep gratitude and love that Brahms felt for Schumann all his life. And there are many documents of that in the music. Nowhere more than in this Benedictus movement.